Our theme for this past 4 weeks has been Life is Worth Living Well. And today's topic is practicing what we preach. Well, actually, practicing what we preach is just a saying. In Science of Mind, we do not preach, but we do emulate that which we wish to see. That is to say, that we work to equal or exceed any behavior which demonstrates our beliefs by practicing that in our daily living. And that is what's known as walking our talk. So, how many areas are there in my life, in your life, in the lives of anyone who wishes to walk their talk? That may be a short list of things for some of us, a lengthier one for others, where walking our talk is appropriate. And one of those things probably shows up on a lot of lists. And that is the F word. Stay with me now. It's a recordable word. It's forgive. Now, some people may think, oh, well, that's easy for her to say because she doesn't know my story. True, I haven't heard them all, but I've heard many, including my own. And that's part of why I've chosen to proceed with this talk. Many of you have heard me talk before about Fred Luskin in this little book, the author of Forgive for Good. And yes, there are countless other books and articles written about forgiveness and forgiving. I particularly like Fred's title, Forgive for Good, because it tells you two things right in the title. One, this book will guide you to forgive for good, meaning forever, and it will guide you to forgive for your own good. His research in direct dialogue with a large number of people recovering from a variety of physical, mental, and emotional conditions has given him a broad spectrum of insight about the why and the why nots of forgiveness. So I want to begin with what Dr. Luskin has described as what forgiveness is not. It doesn't mean that one must condone unhappiness or unkindness. It also doesn't mean forgetting something painful that happened. It's not about excusing poor behavior or even reconciling with the offender. And it doesn't mean giving up having feelings. Those are what forgiveness is not. Interestingly enough, though, when we learn the art of forgiveness, releasing the pain and bringing about reconciliation may occur if one chooses for it to. So now let's talk about what forgiveness is. Fred Luskin is the founder and director of Stanford University's Forgivingness Project. He holds a PhD in counseling and health psychology. And here are some of his ideas from the extensive work that he's done with individuals and groups, literally all over the world, in developing the art of forgiveness. I really like that phrase, the art of forgiveness. So here's one to consider. Forgiveness is for you, not the offender. Forgiveness is taking back your power rather than having given it away for someone else to use against you. Forgiveness is taking responsibility for how you feel. Another way of saying that is, I take responsibility for how I feel. Forgiveness is about your healing, not the people who hurt you. Actually, no one can hurt us unless we allow it. We allow ourselves to be hurt. This is an interesting one. Forgiveness is a trainable skill. I had never thought of it that way until I read that in the book. Forgiveness helps you get control over your feelings. Forgiveness improves your mental and physical health, and we'll talk more about that in a few moments. Forgiveness is becoming a hero instead of a victim. Forgiveness is a choice. Everyone can learn to forgive. Forgiveness is the peace that we learn to feel when we let go of what has previously been our unresolved grievances. There's a chapter in his book on the science of forgiveness. Interesting title, The Science of Forgiveness. But in today's world, more and more we're finding those kinds of parallels. And in it, he refers on virtually every page to the physical and the emotional benefits of learning and practicing forgiveness. Because those benefits can be measured specifically, physically. And since we know that our physical well-being is the effect of our thinking, we know that the mental work that we do is the starter button in reconnecting with our whole being by healing the mental cause. So here's just a couple of reminders of this from other sources. The quote, "Forgiveness is the fragrance the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." Do you remember who said that? Mark Twain. Here's another one. "The desire and the ability to forgive are already ideas in the mind of God. It's known as love. Unconditional love." Ernest Holmes said that. So it's also very interesting that Luskin studies with various groups who were using his technique called PERT, P-E-R-T, and that's an acronym which I'll talk further about in a few minutes. Those being monitored using this process of PERT showed significant increases in blood pressure, in heart rate, in arterial wall pressure, in muscle tension and agitation, discomfort, when they were directed to return to thinking about their grudge, about what they were upset about. So using the technique was actually bringing all of those physical reactions to thought down to acceptable levels. And as soon as they were instructed to go back to remember what was it that I was so upset about, that I carry this grudge, all of it went back up. You know, when you stop to think about that, difficulties, mistreatments, and unkindness do not come with guaranteed extended warranties. Think about that. They also seldom impact the target of those behaviors, meaning the people that, quote, are causing them in us. And I say quote because no one can cause anything in you without your permission. Instead, what happens though, when we are thinking about those difficulties, those mistreatments and those unkindnesses, it impacts our own body, our own mind. Luskin calls that renting out space in your mind. It's like you're renting it out to somebody else to fill. And which is the same as saying what happened before is still happening, even though it may have been months or years ago. And he cites several examples in the book of people who were carrying these grudges for years and years and years after, and allowing what they perceived as having happened to still impact them physically and emotionally. There's another idea about this that I'd like to offer you. This is not in the material that I've read from Luskin, but it's in my own experience in working with people in my counseling practice. Holding a grudge, blaming, shaming others, accepting emotional damage from somebody else's behavior is exhausting. It's exhausting. It causes us to leak energy with no positive benefit or renewal. Nothing positive where our bodies, our minds, and our spirits are concerned. So we cannot be energized by something which is non-existent in the mind of the creative power that we call God or divine intelligence. So here are some of Fred's ideas on the obstacles for forgiving that we sometimes encounter. The first one is the tendency to believe that this is an unforgivable offense, when what it is really an inability to forgive. Here's another one. Obstacles to forgiveness are always about motivation or the lack of it. And of course, where is that? That's within us. I am motivated to forgive. Or I really don't want to let this go. But you see, obstacles themselves are not the offenses. The obstacle is a lack of tools with which to work with these ideas. Here's another one. The tendency to continue reacting to hurt in ways that don't work. You remember that saying about doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results? That's what we're talking about here. Reacting to hurt in ways that have not worked before and aren't working now. So now here's some tools that you can work with. Here are the positives on this. The first one is to recognize that motivation is born of the desire and the need to feel better about yourself. Here's another. Make a list of all those ways that don't work and promise yourself you're not going to use those anymore. Find something more interesting to try. Or, as Carolyn May says, stop it. Try something new. Here's the third idea, another tool to work with. Recognize that forgiveness is practical. It enables us to free up that space in our minds that has been rented out to hurt and to anger. And it enables us to understand that our experience of hurt is no more real than our ability to feel good. It's just that easy to go from the negative to the positive, where we put our attention becomes our intention, whether it's here in the negative or here in the positive. Here's the next one. Take responsibility for how you feel, rather than blaming the other person or persons or what's happening in the outer world. Take responsibility for how you feel. Spend your time and your energy finding the beauty and the love that's already in your life. When you bring more positive experiences into your life, your hurts, quote unquote, diminish in importance. In fact, be careful, they may disappear. They may just dissipate for lack of any energy being directed toward them. And practice PERT, P-E-R-T. This is the acronym for Luskin's Positive Emotion Refocusing Techniques. Positive Emotion Refocusing Technique. And if you missed that, it's on YouTube in a few weeks, and it's in the book. So recognize the capability that you have to maintain peace and calm. And this is helpful in any situation when you feel anger, hurt, depression, bitterness. It takes about 45 seconds, anytime, anywhere. Can you imagine? 45 seconds. I've been angry, and I've been upset, and I've been bitter for 5 years, and in 45 seconds, I can change that? Yeah. Maybe more than once. You may be called upon to do that more than once. But in the last 5 years, how many have you done the other is the real question. How many times have I been angry? Have I been depressed? Have I been bitter? Have I been hurt? When you begin to look at that, it's a pretty good deal by comparison. And this is how you do it. You breathe deeply 3 times. 3 times. On the third breath, you bring the mind's eye to an image of someone you love or a beautiful scene in nature. You continue breathing deeply, focusing on that image or that scene. And then ask the relaxed part of you, the peaceful part of you, what can you do to resolve your difficulty? Still breathing deeply and still with that image in mind. What can I do to resolve my difficulty? Can it really be that easy? Well, you might want to read the book. You might want to turn the YouTube on when this one comes up live, listen to it, and try it. What have you got to lose? It doesn't cost you a penny. It's 45 seconds out of your life. Or life into 45 seconds. So, in closing, I want to share with you something more from Dr. Holmes. There are very few references in the Science of Mind text to forgiveness of other people. In fact, in all of his writings, there are very few references of his talking about forgiveness of other people. What there is a significant number of references to God's Spirit, creative energies, forgiveness of its progeny, and that would be you and me. Holmes says, how often we condemn what we should forgive, we censure when we might praise. What untold grief of heart might be relieved by words of cheer and forgiveness. And that could either be for myself or for others, couldn't it? The healing power of divine spirit works to create and accomplish forgiveness in the human equation, just as it works in the spiritual. So what he's saying is, forgiveness work is not about my forgiving someone else, but rather forgiving myself. for having created or focused on that. And that this is exactly how we are held in the arms of Spirit, in that there is nothing we can possibly do that separates Spirit from us. It's only when we separate ourselves that that separation occurs. So Holmes goes on to say, the eternal giver is equally the eternal forgiver, and love forever counterbalances hate. Joy will always put sadness to flight, and good always overcomes evil. Peace neutralizes confusion, and hope banishes doubt. It's all about the tendency of Spirit's thought through each of us. The greatest example is just that. And so it is.